Hi, peace lovers, and welcome back. I'm Avis Kalfsbeck, and this is the Pieces Here podcast. We are currently in a fiction series here on the podcast titled Experiment Zero of the Peace Experiments. This is a 13-episode series following the reports of Kitty O'Compost, a small-town journalist with a sharp wit and a truth-telling goat named Marzipan. In this story, Kitty untangles the mystery of a global peace protocol through the lens of a local pothole, proving that the big questions of the world are usually hidden in the small things we walk over every day. It's a journey about the commons, the power of young people, and the quiet maintenance of peace. If you found us in the middle of this series, feel free to pop back to episode 184 to start the story from the beginning. This next chapter steps into the capital where peace is discussed but rarely touched. Kitty watches power perform itself, and the young people are politely sidelined. Here is Chapter 10, The Hearing on Global Inertia. The capital had that over-laundered smell common to places where decisions were performed rather than made. Even the air in the convention district felt recycled, like it had already listened to too many hearings. Outside the hotel ballroom, I took my census of the self. Kitty O'Compost equipped as follows: navy slacks, thrift store respectable and for once with knees unscuffed, a white button-up shirt with sleeves rolled once, formality lightly resisted, a soft gray blazer borrowed and slightly too hopeful, a messenger bag containing a recorder, a notebook, the disarmament protocol packet, and an emergency granola bar. A press badge that smelled like fresh plastic and old ambition, and no marzipan because the invitation had included a bullet point titled Approved Species. Inventory incomplete, but adequate. Addie, I murmured to the ceiling vents, just keep me calibrated. Inside, the ballroom stretched cavernously, lit by chandeliers shaped like inverted wedding cakes. Rows of beige chairs faced a long dais where officials sat in a posture best described as ceremonial fatigue. Behind them loomed a screen so large it seemed ready to display planetary consequences. Off to the side, roped off like an exhibit, sat the youth delegation. They wore blazers a size too big for the boys and a size too small for the quickly developing girls. Their first-time dress shoes were stiff as gilt. A few stockings, clearly selected by overzealous grandmas who hadn't bought hosiery since the Reagan years, glimmered faintly under the fluorescent wash. They looked translucent in the glare, as if the room were designed to wash them out. I took my place in the press section, a narrow strip of blue tape in tolerated existence. A man at the front, clearly the session chair and not an MC, tapped the microphone. Welcome to today's hearing on global stabilization and strategic readiness, the chair said. Our goal is to examine the feasibility of transitioning from current deterrent frameworks to emergent de-escalation technologies. A sentence that long should have come with a stretch break. He went on to say that they would hear from key representatives of strategic infrastructure. Youth observers would be granted time, schedule permitting. Schedule permitting. I wrote it down. Marzipan would have stomped the floor right then, but I left her back at Mother Ceres with a particularly fibrous organic gardening catalog to keep her occupied. I could only hope there was still a cover left on it by the time I got home. What followed was a slow-motion avalanche of greetings, acknowledgments, prefaces, and thank yous to committees that had likely never once met in person. Finally, the chair announced, "Please welcome Mr. Halden Files, Senior Strategic Advisor for Parallax Stack, Inc." A precise hush settled. Files rose, stoic, composed, and improbably thin in a way that suggested he had spent most of his life near obese until science scared the weight off. He'd swapped his digital interface green for the sharp HD reality of the Capitol. He was still wearing the tie with the tiny shields, a private signal to the anti-commons that he was here to defend the status quo. He carried a stack of papers he would never consult. This speech lived in the architecture of his bones. Honorable panel, he began. Distinguished colleagues, valued observers, I am here today not out of fear but out of realism. Always a promise and opening for the least realistic parts. Let me be clear, we all desire peace, but desire alone does not create stability. Peace must be defended, and history teaches us that our deterrence capabilities, our strategic readiness, are what prevents aggression. Pen scribbled, fingers tapped. This disarmament protocol, he continued, gesturing towards the large screen, imagines a world in which artificial intelligence dismantles our weapon systems. Elegant, yes. Optimistic, certainly. But in practical terms, it is ecologically disruptive to the defense ecosystem. It is frankly unsustainable. He was using our words. He was taking the language of the commons and twisting it into a gate, one with the welcome sign on the front and a keypad you were never given the code to. If we dismantle our deterrent infrastructure, Files said, we create vulnerability. Bad actors, rogue states, non-aligned entities. These forces are not guided by goodwill. There will always be those who exploit weakness. He said non-aligned entities the way some people say termites. And let us not underestimate the economic implications. Entire regions rely on defense manufacturing. Disarmament would decimate livelihoods. Innovation itself would suffer. Our weapons are not engines of war. They are engines of stability. The room nodded in synchronized solemnity. I wrote, weapons framed as stability, peace framed as collapse, large myth delivered with medium confidence. The youth delegation fidgeted. The panelists looked over their heads, their eyes tracking the scrolling data on the monitors instead of the living faces in the overflow section. Halden Files concluded, transitioning to disarmament is, in short, a noble dream with dangerous consequences. We must proceed with caution, extreme caution. Peace without strength is not peace. It is an invitation. He stepped away to a round of steady, relieved applause. The hearing continued with more experts, more acronyms, and more sentences crafted to be heard without being understood. When the chair finally said, we now invite the youth observers for brief statements, adults shifted in their seats the same way they do when asking a child in the back seat about their day while glancing at their phone. The students were given 3 minutes, not each, total. They lined up dutifully. A brave girl spoke about wanting a future without constant fear. A boy described losing sleep over climate and conflict. Another youth mentioned wanting adults to test their assumptions instead of defending them. The panel nodded politely, like they were listening to an earnest weather report. Garrett never reached the microphone. Time was called. The chair thanked them warmly for their valuable perspectives, which is adult code for nothing said requires us to behave differently tomorrow. I wrote, youth contribution equals ornamental, system performance equals uninterrupted, outcome equals predetermined. The hearing adjourned with polite finality. I stayed seated a moment longer. My phone rang. It was Sarah. Marzipan won't stop stomping, she said. I know why, I told her. Around us, the chandeliers dimmed slightly as staff began folding programs and collecting half-finished bottles of water. The careful choreography of listening without hearing was dissolving, but the drums of Marzipan were still beating back home. I stood and headed toward the hallway. The youth delegation filed past, compressed between two staffers. Garrett walked slightly behind the others, notebook half open. "What'd you think?" I asked. Garrett closed the notebook slowly. "Informative," she said. "The control group is very consistent." "Meaning?" "The adults," she said, "were measuring how long they can defend a hypothesis without testing it." I nodded, noticing an almost undetectable quiver in Garrett's voice. It was the sound of a kid who had expected a fight and was given a brochure instead. We moved toward the exits, Garrett toward her chaperones and me toward the elevators to find a place to think. Two small points of resistance, drifting out of the grand, echoing room where nothing had changed. Nothing yet. You've been listening to Experiment 0 of the Peace Experiments. I hope you'll join us for the next episode. My books and peace projects can be found at aviskaufspec.com, including the Pater the Water Dog Saves the Planet Best Friend Ecofiction series. For those who want to dive deeper into the peace themes we covered in 2025, I've created a 2025 recap ebook. It includes everything from Kitty Ocampo's satire debut to the deep history of the Great Disarmament. It's complimentary and available now at aviskaufspec.com/2025. Thank you again. Listen for the peace.